Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for supporting early cancer investigators, or early career investigators in cancer, building personal resilience and supportive networks in uncertain times. My name is Jennifer, and I will be your WebEx technical support host. Before we dive into today's meeting, I wanted to provide some quick information about the webinar platform. All lines have been muted on entry. And then we ask that you keep your lines muted, and you will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. You can submit your comments, questions at any time using the chat or Q&A box, and select all panelists from the dropdown. If you do not see either of these options, you may need to activate the appropriate panel using the menu option found at the bottom of your screen. We will also be posting a closed captioning link within the chat box momentarily if you need that. I'd also like to know that today's webinar is being recorded. Most of today's presentation will be discussion-based. There will not be any slides outside of those that I'm presenting this morning. With that, we recommend that you transition your screen to grid view once I stop sharing. You can find that in the upper right-hand corner next to the participant panel of your screen. And with that, I will turn it over to Lynn Wilkins to introduce our webinar.
Hi, I'm Lynn Wilkins. I'm the current chair of the steering committee for the NCI Cohort Consortium. And this is our second webinar of our webinar series, and we're really pleased to have this presentation. There will be more coming. We had our first one was on COVID, and this one is on early career. We're going to have subtypes of cancer, health disparities, early onset cancer, aging, and data sharing webinars are in the planning stages. But this webinar about early career, it follows up on a priority of the past chair who wanted to get more early stage investigators involved in cohort consortia activities. So that being said, I'd like to turn it over to the moderators, Katie and Erica. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I am Katie O'Brien. I'm a staff scientist at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. I work mostly on the sister study and breast and ovarian cancer. And I'm here as a representative of the AMC, which is the Associate Member Council. And just to tell you a little bit about that is we're a representative body of early career investigators involved in NCI Cohort Consortium studies. The overarching mission of the AMC is to engage and support early career investigators through professional development, career networking opportunities, and research collaborations within the Cohort Consortium, and to position members of the next generation of investigators to attain leadership roles within the consortium. Some of us here are the leadership of the AMC, but we comprised of 4 to 6 early career investigators, but anyone is welcome to join these activities and let us know if you are interested in getting more involved. Membership is voluntary and targeted to postdoctoral fellows, researchers, and early career investigators, generally within 10 years of terminal degree. We welcome anyone who's in any way involved with the Cohort Consortium. And with that, I'll turn it over to Erica to introduce our speakers.
Great, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lynn. I'm Erica Rees-Punia. I'm a principal scientist at the Society. So I'm primarily working with the cancer prevention studies 2 and 3. And I have the pleasure of introducing our 4 panelists that will be speaking and answering questions for us today. So first up, we have Dr. Lauren McCullough. She is an assistant professor of epidemiology at Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. Then we've got Dr. Kim Bertrand. She's an assistant professor at Sloan Epidemiology Center at BU. Followed by Julianne Lundy. She's a program manager in the Lymphoma Epidemiology Laboratory at Mayo Clinic. And then finally, we have Dr. Rosalie Waller. She's a research associate, a brand new research associate in biomedical statistics and informatics, also at Mayo Clinic. So what we're going to do is we're going to give each panelist about 5 minutes to discuss a few important topics. And then for most of our time, we're going to be saving it for questions and discussion. So first, I'd like to open it up to Dr. Lauren McCullough.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by saying that the motivation for this is that we really are all operating under these unusual circumstances, which have been paralyzing for some and productive for others. But I think it's important for each individual to take a survey of your unique situation and to cultivate a plan to maximize your success. And so hopefully some of the things we will share today will help you do that. And hopefully we'll have some good conversations on how to do that. So I'm going to talk about goal setting in this context of working in a pandemic. And I really think that goal setting boils down to three fundamental questions. The first being, who am I? What do I want? And then what is your plan? And so one of the main reasons I start with who am I, because I feel like who you are at your core really drives your decisions. And you shouldn't lose sight of that in the midst of a pandemic. For example, I spent a disproportionate amount of time homeschooling, changing poopy diapers, dealing with laundry, and feeding 3 hungry boys. And I have to constantly remind myself I am a scholar working to eliminate disparities in cancer outcomes. And this affirmation for me keeps me focused on the bigger picture of my professional life. And I become less consumed by the reality of this temporary, seems like really long, but temporary circumstance. So you have to remind yourself of who you are and why you're working, even if we're in a pandemic and it doesn't feel like your day-to-day mirrors who you are professionally. Next, what do you want? So these are the actual goals, and they can be short-term or long-term. Everyone needs to have them. Your goals drive your behavior, and they're going to vary by rank, by expertise, even your personal life events. For trainees joining us, you may just want to finish your thesis or dissertation. Postdocs may just want to find a job. Early career scholars may want to gain promotion. I think the goal itself is actually less important than your acknowledging it and communicating it to whoever your accountability partners are. So that can be your mentors, your partner, your friends, etc. And I think it's important to know that your goals in this setting look very different than they did pre-pandemic, and that's okay. And even for people like me, I consider myself to be a master multitasker. I really suggest only having 1 or 2 goals that you're working towards and making sure that they're realistic. And I think it's also important to note that they may not always be scientific. So like last fall, my goal was to master breastfeeding for my child because that was something that was important for me. And so anything that week that had nothing with that was not important. And early in the pandemic, the goal was to get the kids situated into homeschooling. And then ultimately a goal became figure out a way to exercise every day. And while those weren't necessarily scientific goals, they were goals that I needed for myself. That way I could actually be a productive scientist later. And so don't think if you're not making a scientific progress in 1 week, but you're making personal progress, that is any less. No, that actually is going to facilitate your scientific progress even more. And then finally, what's your plan? In this setting, I've seen a lot of people struggle, my colleagues, my trainees, with just trying to get things accomplished and, feeling unfulfilled. And I think this time really necessitates that we have a plan, but we have to remain flexible in those plans. And so again, being realistic with yourself is really key. You have to ask how much time we have to work towards this deadline. And I know more than anybody, there's time that we tell people we have, and then realistically, we know I really only have 50% of that. And so you have to keep that in the back of your mind. And I can give you a quick example. I just submitted a grant last week, and to write a grant would normally take me about 8 weeks, about 4 or 5 hours a day. But I know that I'm operating at about 50% capacity right now. So does that mean I don't do the grant? It just means I have to change my timeline. So rather than the 8 weeks, I calculated for 16 weeks. So I began writing in July, just a couple of hours every morning, and eventually it was a slow crawl, but eventually I got there. And so a lot of times it's not about changing our goals or getting rid of our goals, ways to get our goals accomplished with the realization that things are not happening the way they did pre-pandemic. And so you just have to sometimes recalibrate your own expectations of yourself. And so I hope that you all can step back and think through, who am I? What is it that I want? And then do I have a plan to get there? And making sure your plan is realistic for your unique situation, and knowing that everybody is dealing sort of with their own challenges during the pandemic, but stay focused on what you need and use your resources to help you make sure that you're making progress towards whatever that long or short-term goal is. And I will pass it over to Kim.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren. Can you all hear me, Katie? Can I get a thumbs up if you can? Okay, my internet was going out a little bit, but thank you so much, Lauren. So, I was thinking about what Lauren said, and once you've got your goals aligned, then you actually have to implement that. So what are you doing to make your day-to-day activities and your tasks align with those goals? And, just to acknowledge and reiterate what Lauren said, we are all exhausted. 2020 is a particularly challenging year. And early career researchers who may have young families, as Lauren mentioned, or who may be trying to get their careers off the ground, submitting lots and lots of grants, publications, we may be especially vulnerable right now to overwork and overwhelm. And so I feel that now more than ever, we need to protect not only our time, but our sanity. And I think we need to do that by starting to practice how to say no effectively. And I think we also need to keep in mind that when we're saying no in order to be productive academically or personally, we should also step back and realize this is not going to be our peak productive year, and it's okay for that not to be our peak productive year. So why can't we just say yes to every single opportunity that presents itself to us? Well, one, too many commitments will lead to overwork and overwhelm, and ultimately to resentment as well. If you're working nights, if your kids are complaining that you're never around, I mean, this is not a good situation to be in. And we simply can't do it all. So we'll find ourselves, if we say yes to things as they come along, we'll find ourselves working on activities or spending time on activities that do not align with the goals that we have set, according to Lauren's suggestions. And maybe they don't align with our goals, they don't align with our values, they don't align with our priorities. But I know in my life, and both professionally and personally, like I face a lot of barriers to saying no. Some of them are technical barriers, like I just don't know how to say it in a way that will be convincing. But this can go lots of different ways. But some of the barriers that I faced are one, I might feel that the request, especially if it's coming from a relationship where there's a power dynamic, for example, from a boss maybe, I might feel that the request is not really a request, but an obligation or an expectation. I'm also guilty of being a little bit of a people pleaser, so I don't want to let anybody down. So I have a hard time saying no if I feel like I'm letting somebody down. One of the things I am still struggling with, and I think many people are, is I don't really always know how to figure out if this activity or this opportunity does align well with my priorities or my goals for this year. Or I might not know how much time it will take. I might underestimate how much time a particular activity will take. And another big thing is I've been afraid that if I say no to one opportunity, that may close the door to future opportunities. And I can give you in a little bit an example of that. And occasionally we get a request or an opportunity that does align very well with our goals and our priorities, but we simply don't have the bandwidth to carry through with it. So that's where I've been finding a pretty challenging time, which is saying no to something I really want to do, especially when it's something that I love doing and that it does align with my priorities. So some of the strategies that have worked for me are never say no or yes on the spot. I always ask for time to think about it. So I say, this sounds like a great opportunity. Can I have a couple of days to think about it, go over it? I might have some more follow-up questions for you because I want to understand really what this is. So even if it's something that I know I'm going to say no or something that I'm sure I'm going to say yes to, I always ask for time anyway. Just make that a habit so that I can have that expectation that I'll have the time to think carefully through something that I'm having more of a challenging decision-making process with. And so when during that time, after I've asked for the time, I think about what would it take me to say yes to this? And so one of the examples I wanted to give was the time when I was a graduate student. I think I was in my last year of graduate school, finishing my dissertation, and either I was pregnant or I had a young baby. I can't remember which, but I was invited to participate on a project. It was really working on a new grant opportunity. And I think it was paid. I think I was asked to spend about 20 hours a week. And I was really honored to be asked because it sort of meant that, you know, the senior leadership felt that I had something to contribute. And I thought it was a great opportunity to get to know some more senior professors in my group at my school. But I also realized 20 hours a week was not going to be possible. So what would it take me to say yes? And I sort of came back and said, you know, I might be able to do this in 10 hours a week. You know, I might be able to give you 10 hours of my time. And what do you think about that? But then ultimately I realized that, you know, even though they said, sure, we'll take 10 hours, I realized, well, if this is a task that's actually going to take 20 hours and I'm going to try to do it in 10, there's no way I'm going to be good at this. So you want to really be careful about, you know, always overpromise, always underpromise and overdeliver. So I didn't want to get in a situation where I wasn't actually doing a great job on this task. When you consider what would it take to say yes, maybe it's eliminating something else in your life that you're doing. The other strategy that works really well for me is consulting a friend or establishing a no committee. Many of you may have heard about no committees. These trusted advisors can help you determine whether or not something aligns with your priorities right now or whether it doesn't. And saying no respectfully, this is where I alluded to before about the technical, how do you actually say no? And so taking that time really helps you frame your response to saying no. And so in the example I gave about when I was asked to work on a big grant project, I did end up saying no. And I said, you know, thank you so much for thinking of me for this opportunity. I would have liked to do it, but I just realized given my other commitments, I'm not going to be able to be successful at this. And I think because I said no so thoughtfully and carefully that was really well respected. And at the time I was really worried about how that would, you know, whether I would be considered for future opportunities. But in the end, I actually was invited to postdoc with the same group. And I think they did respect that I was able to identify what I was capable of versus what I wasn't. And so I think that actually reflected well on me at the time. So now what I'm struggling with nowadays is, you know, during this pandemic is what if something really does align with your priorities and your goals and you would love to do it, but you just can't commit. And one of the things that is happening right now is prior to COVID pandemic, I almost never said no to mentoring undergraduate or graduate or master's students. I was always able to find a small project for them to do, and I really enjoy that part of my work. I enjoy interacting with students and trainees. But post-COVID, with my kids in remote school and all the other demands on my time, I'm realizing that I just don't have the bandwidth for that. So what I've done instead of saying no is I've said not yet. I've said I'm so sorry, I don't have anything for you this semester, but please contact me again this summer. Things may be different then. I've also started passing on the names of these students to other colleagues who do have time for mentorship. And so, you know, thinking about not saying no, but saying not right now is another strategy that I've been using. So I'm sure we can think of a lot more great strategies, and I look forward to the Q&A where I can hear what some of you in the audience have done to successfully say no. But for that, I'm just going to leave it for now and turn it to our next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, I believe I'm up next. Is that right? Okay, great. So I'll be talking about managing teams remotely, and as both Lauren and Kim alluded to, the thing that is overarching in managing teams is understanding and flexibility. We are all going through these times together, and I think that's the overarching theme. But the way that I'm going to look at this today is, you know, what's the same about managing our teams or leading our teams? What's different? And then really focusing on what are the needs that we need to have in place in order to do this effectively, because we can all manage, but we need to be able to do it effectively. So, you know, it seems like each week we're adjusting to something new, something we need to relay to our teams about PPE or about new modifications we need to make. But looking at this, what's the same? So we're all working very differently, but the same is our people. So our teams are the same. It's the same great people we've always worked with, just in a very, very different way. Something I struggled with a little bit was that the expectations of work. So again, speaking to a little bit what Lauren was talking about with goal setting, having these goals for our teams and expectations of our teams have to be flexible. We all have new coworkers in our homes, be it our pets, our family, or the workers we have around our homes. There's new coworkers that don't understand how we're working, and our teams all have the same thing. So we can't expect the same, but we also should be very clear in what our expectations are of our team. And I'll talk a little bit about that in needs. Something else is the same is our teams. We need to connect with our teams, and that's very important. We can't have hallway conversations like we used to. We don't leave a meeting and walk to another meeting and have those hallway conversations. We have to be really intentional about replacing those conversations with our teammates or our coworkers or our colleagues, and really fully embrace the digital tools that we have available to us. Really, when I was trying to think about what's the same, that's what I thought of. And then as far as what's different, everything else, everything is different. The way that we connect, the way that we work, the way we talk to each other and everyone else around us, just basically everything has changed. So getting into needs, I think one of our greatest needs is really strong communication to our teams and within our teams. There's, in my opinion, no such thing as over communicating during this time. There is such a thing as information overload, and we are getting a lot of information all the time that we're needing to relay to our teams. But as a leader of these teams, it's important for us to be able to funnel this information and really get the important information to our teams and be available to them. They used to be able to stop by and ask a quick question, but we need to make sure our teams know how to get a hold of us. Instant messaging or text or a call. But one thing that's really important is that something like Kim was talking about too, not being overly available either. We need to be able to make sure our teams can count on us for an answer, but at the same time, our answer can be, I can't get to that right now. Let's schedule something and let's talk about it later. Strong leadership is critical. The sky is falling mentality can't be how we're leading. 2020, as mentioned before, is hard. There are things coming at us all the time, but our strong, consistent messaging of here's where we're going, here's your expectations, is important. And also listening to our teams. We need to listen to both what they're saying and what they're not saying, and adjust our expectations of them accordingly. Being an advocate for our teams is huge, and that goes hand in hand with listening. So the things that they're saying and they're not saying, we need to be an advocate for our teams for the things that they need. I would end by saying that one of the most important things is being a healthy leader yourself, making sure that you are taking those time for brain breaks and, allowing yourself to not, I don't know about all of you, but the meeting demand has increased since we've moved home. And so going from one digital platform to another, I think we realize we sit here for 4 hours and don't even stand up. And so I think scheduling and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves physically and mentally is very important. In order to lead a team, we need to be a strong leader and be strong in all of those categories. So I'm going to pass it off to Rosalie.
Thanks, Kim, Lauren, and Julianne for what you've shared. And I really just want to echo a lot of what you've already said and acknowledge how disruptive the pandemic has been to both our professional and personal lives. Things that we took for granted are now a challenge. But one of the things that I keep coming back to that Julianne mentioned as well is just the need to be intentional right now. And I'm thinking about this as kind of staying mindful of the present and what I need to stay productive and healthy, keeping a focus of where I want to go and making sure that I'm intentional about spending time to get there. So I wanted to sort of sketch out what the past year has looked like for me as an illustration of what transitioning from a pre-doc to postdoc in 2020 might look like, and then give a few examples of how being intentional has helped. So go back with me to January and imagine, if you can, when COVID wasn't a daily word. And in January and February, I was interviewing in person for my postdoc, and I accepted a position in February. Then as lockdown started in March and April, I was writing my dissertation, which I've then defended remotely in May. The next couple of months, I pivoted to writing my NCI K00 award. And then in August, my partner and I moved halfway across the country, and I started my postdoc. And a couple of things that helped through that, especially as I was writing my dissertation and K award, was being intentional about setting up systems of accountability. Writing is always a challenge for me, in part because the deadlines can be sort of flexible and it's a big project. So setting a goal for writing a small chunk, maybe that's a chapter, a figure, a table, a section of a grant, then communicating that with someone else, can be a mentor, or sometimes I would recruit friends or family to say, hey, I'm trying to get this done today, and then check in with them, and as just a system of accountability to keep making progress on those big projects. And then throughout the pandemic, I've really appreciated mentors being intentional about team building. So a couple of examples of this. When the lockdown started, one of my mentors just sent out a box of tea to everyone on her team, which is a small gesture, but it really went a long ways. And then when my partner and I relocated to start my postdoc, one of my mentors took us to dinner outside, which really communicated a lot about awareness of the challenging time and helped me feel seen, even though I'm working remotely mostly. One thing that's really on my mind right now as I start at a new institution is how to build network here. And it's really, here again, you have to be very intentional because I'm not just bumping into people in the hallway or don't have those opportunities to chat about smaller things in between meetings. So I'm trying to be intentional about who I need to connect with, and then taking that first step to reach out. One thing that's been helpful is just having a goal each week to meet someone new and set up a brief 15-minute get-to-know-you call, just to kind of meet people here. And it can be intimidating to reach out, but I'm finding that most people are happy to chat or just find a time to do that. And then, as several people have said, self-care is super important right now, and being intentional about building that in. And then leaning into our communities, kind of our systems of support. So as I've relocated to a new city, that's been challenging to figure out how to establish a community here where a lot of events, community events are not happening. So I'm trying to be intentional about seeking out events where I can meet up with people, maybe meeting someone for a walk or saying yes to opportunities where it's safe to meet with them. And then I'm also leaning back into established relationships and trying to find time for things like a virtual dinner with some friends to maintain that community of support. So I want to end on saying I'm working on right now being intentional about leaning into this uncertainty of right now and trying to just stay present and believe that whatever happens, we'll find a way through.
All right, thanks everyone. Those were some really insightful comments and good advice. So we're going to open it up to questions now, and I will go ahead and take the lead for everyone. I thought I'd give you the opportunity to vent a little bit and say one thing that you cannot wait to change when this is over, and then end on a positive note and say one thing that you think will change for the better because of this pandemic. Just go ahead and go in order. So Lauren first.
Well, as much as I've loved homeschooling my two oldest children, I would love for them to go back to regular school, not just for, you know, our mental state of me being like mommy teacher, but I don't know, something about them going off and I have my own day and they have their own day and we come back together and we talk about like our days. And I don't know, it gives me the opportunity to miss them and appreciate them. So I do look forward to the day when they're able to go back to school and interact with other kids too, because they're just like fighting and stuff right now, which is not fun. You know, along the same lines and in the same domain, I actually really like that I'm able to see what they're working on at school. I think being home has given me unique perspective on their individual challenges and strengths that I think, is going to inform how we sort of coach them academically for the rest of their lives. So I can say I appreciate that. And I think post-pandemic, I will try to remain engaged and involved in their academics. Because I definitely think it's helpful to have more insight on what they're struggling with and what they're really succeeding with. That's me.
Well, like Lauren, I also have young children, so I was going to say I look forward to them going back to school as well. But I guess I'll add something sort of for my own self-care. Prior to the pandemic, I get together monthly with a group of friends from graduate school, and that group has morphed a little bit and includes some non-graduate school friends as well. And but all really, in health-related careers, generally in academia, but not all. And we used to meet monthly, just sort of for happy hour and dinner. And that was really a great source of inspiration for me, and also, venting too, as Katie said, but really just grounding me and letting me have a little bit of something that is, not family demands and not work demands, but something social. So I really look forward to that coming back, or that's something I really miss. I miss being in the office a little bit too, with those casual conversations that Julianne was talking about. In terms of what I'm hopeful for, I forget what the question was exactly, but what I'm hopeful for, looking for, or happy that I think my family has a bit of a new routine. And I think we recognize now that my husband and I both have full-time jobs, and I think we both feel that we don't really need to be in the office 5 days a week anymore. And that's saved a lot on commute time, and has allowed for more family time, honestly, with dinners that we're having together rather than separately. And so other than looking forward to a vaccine, that's the one thing I think I will take away from this experience and try to hold on to a little bit of some of that quality family time we're getting.
I will echo what Lauren and Kim are saying. I have 2 teenagers who are home, 2 teenage girls who are home, both doing school from home while I'm working from here. So that, does present some unique challenges. And like Lauren said, I'm looking forward to missing them again. I see them all the time, and so it's really hard to miss them. So that I am definitely looking forward to having that. And like you said too, Lauren, having them be able to have that social interactions, that's so important with their friends. I'm missing that for them too. And then I think I would say I would agree with Kim in that a positive has been that I really do enjoy working from home for the most part. I enjoy the extra balance that it gives me. There's no commute, there's no there's a lot of things that are good about it, even in all of the things that are challenging. So I think finding that when we can go back to whatever the next normal is, working, I found that I can work effectively from home and help other people also learn how to work effectively from home.
Yeah, I would just echo some of that. What I am looking forward to missing is kind of the energy of being around people in the office, or I feel like there's a really different sort of excitement of being in person with people at meetings or at conferences. But I also hope that there'll be flexibility in schedule and ability to work, remotely some days, but go in when it's productive other days. And it's nice right now to be able to have a little bit more flexibility with schedule and block in something like a run for self-care that would be a little bit harder to fit in the middle of the day in the office.
Thanks so much for all of that feedback and for all of those really helpful stories. We do have a couple questions that are rolling in, and as a reminder, you can always enter your questions into the chat box. But the first one is directed towards Kim. And thinking about everything that you shared, how do you build independence as an early stage investigator when some requests from senior colleagues may feel compulsory? So this person finds it hard to develop their own ideas and follow their own ideas because they feel like they're mostly responding to the requests of others.
Well, you can't hear me sighing because I didn't unmute quick enough, but yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the question is, when you're trying to build independence and you feel that requests are compulsory, perhaps. I think, thinking about some of the comments that Lauren and Rosalie have made, it's about being intentional. I feel that the work that I have chosen to do is very collaborative, and I don't think I could do it independently. For example, I work on a big cohort study, the Black Women's Health Study, which of course, started in 1995. I did not organize that study. I was not there at the inception of that study, but I'm still a big part of it now. And but I couldn't do it without our faculty and staff as part of that study. So there's a lot of collaboration. So then, we all sort of also have to kind of, we do have to do things that are maybe not perfectly aligned with our research goals. But I think that what we've tried to do, and I don't know how successful we've been, but we're getting there, is having people choose the types of things they want to work on. So we all sort of have we all have to participate in the infrastructure, for example, right? So say we're doing new tumor tissue collection, and my work doesn't really involve tumor block analyses, but I've sort of stepped up to sort of lead that effort. And so is it compulsory? No, I don't think it is, but it's a skill set that I have that I can help organize the collection of tumor tissues. And so I'm happy to contribute in that way. At the same time, if there's a new request, one that is better aligned with what I'm doing, I may think about saying, well, what would it take me to say yes? So thinking about that, what would it take me to say yes to that? And I might go to my, whoever is making the request, the PI maybe, and say, I appreciate this request. I'd like to help out, but I have this other thing on my plate. So is there a way that we can take this other thing off my plate so that I can help you with this new thing? I hope that's a satisfactory answer. It's not easy, but I would continue to go to your no committee for help with that. But generally, I think it needs to be approached with, these are the things I'm doing. Look, right now I'm going up for promotion, right? So I'm an assistant professor and I want to become an associate professor. So I know I have to do service, teaching, and research. And so, that's where my goals are right now. And so if there's something that's coming in that's not aligned with that, I need to be able to say to my mentors and my sponsors, that's a great opportunity, but it doesn't align right now. Can I defer that for a little while, or can we take something else off my plate so that I can do that? So that's the way I would approach it. It's not easy.
If I can add to what Kim said, I think one of the important things as early career scholars that you seek out when you're, going into a postdoc or a new faculty position is mentorship. And so having someone, like when I first arrived at Emory, I got asked to do something, and my response was no, and they weren't very happy. To have my mentor come to my office and say, do I need to cast some shade? It was a huge thing for me, right? Like, this person is saying, I am willing to put myself in the middle of this to protect you. And I think that's something that you want to look for when you're seeking out, these new positions, like who is going to be my person that's going to be on my side. And then the other piece of this is, again, just like Kim mentioned, knowing your goals, knowing kind of the next step is, and communication. If you have a mentoring team or an advisor or whatever, and you're communicating with them on a consistent basis, this is my next goal, this is my next step, then it makes perfect sense that you're going to say no to doing something that's not going to facilitate that step. And so it's hard. It is really hard. I know in the pandemic, I've had to backtrack on things that I said I would do. And I think for me, it's three questions. Does it align with my goal? does this task need me specifically? I agreed to help some very senior person with primary data collection because I didn't have the experience. Well, I don't need to pilot an interview, right? Like I can get you 5 other people to do it in my place. I need to be writing my grant, right? So that task didn't need me specifically. And then does this task need me now? And if those aren't afforded, you know, engage with your advisor or mentors to cast shade so that you can continue to move forward in your career, I think is really important.
Great, thanks. The next question is for Lauren, and it kind of, you may have answered part of it already. It's in thinking about all you said about personal goals and what you are and what you want, do you have any tips for conveying goals to the mentor boss when your goal may not line up with their goals for you? And I would personally add on to that kind of, you know, you're going up for tenure, like how is, this may be institute specific, but like how are institutions addressing the fact that there's this slowdown and that it takes you twice as long to write a grant, and are you able to communicate that well with your advisors, and is something happening to change?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And I should throw out this caveat because people that know me know this, but a lot of people probably don't know me. I'm very honest. And so I'm just going to put that out there before I give my response. So one thing I personally believe is if you don't tell people what you're going to do, they're going to tell you what to do. And so I have a very firm position in that I'm always going to communicate what it is that I want. I'm going to get your opinion and thoughts and sort of, you know, modify that based on your suggestions. But I would rather tell you what it is I want to do than you tell me what I should be doing. And so the strategies that I implement for myself, and I actually have my trainees get in the habit of doing this, is every quarter I do a quarterly review. And at the top of that quarterly review is my goal. It's to achieve tenure at an R1 institution known as an expert and blah, 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 blah. Right. And then under that, I have all the buckets of the things that are going to help me reach that goal. And so by sending that out to my advisors, mentors every month, it is a constant reminder, not every month, every quarter, that this is the goal. And so anything that's not aligning with this, like I'm not doing it unless it's by choice. Right. In the era of COVID where, you know, I feel parents are at a disadvantage, women are at a disadvantage, early career people are at a disadvantage. And I've been in many meetings where, you know, I'm the most junior person. They're like, hey, this is great. We are all at home. Let's do this thing that we thought we were going to do 5 years ago and nobody had time. This is a great time to do it. And I'm like, hello, like I'm over here with 3 kids. And so what I've done, again, you may like it, you may not. But at the bottom of my email, I have on there, I am out of office from 11 to 2 every day for dependent care. And I put that on there as a reminder to everybody that I communicate with that this situation is real for me. Because people can lose sight. I think in March, everybody was very flexible and understanding. And here we are in November, and some people that don't have the same challenges just don't remember. And so I give you this little reminder every time I send because I need for you to understand that these are the situations that I personally am operating under. And so again, it's just over communication. I'm going to tell you my goals 100 times until you have it in your brain so that you know I'm doing this to get here, and whatever you think I should be doing, like it's not telling me in that area, like I'm not doing it. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, definitely helpful. So this next question, we actually are under a similar umbrella of being new and trying to figure it out in this weird situation that we're all in. So we have sort of directed to Rosalie, since she kind of has experienced that or is experiencing right now. And then the question that's really for everyone, but the first one is, it's got to be a challenge to move to a new place and start a new job. So do you have any specific tips for connecting with your new coworkers virtually? And then similarly for everyone, this person just started a new graduate program and it's going to be all virtual, and they're a little worried about building connections, especially if you're thinking about research where connections are so important. So do you have any other advice for them about making meaningful connections virtually? We will start with Rosalie, and if anybody else has comments, they can jump in.
I can start. Yeah, it is challenging to set up your system of support and network in the middle of the pandemic. A few things that I've been trying is sort of leaning into relationships with people at a similar level to me. So there's another postdoc in the lab, and I try to either go on a walk or get a cup of coffee with them outside every couple of weeks and ask them questions about who else should I talk to, who else would you recommend connecting with? Or there's often like postdoc associations, so trying to integrate in with those and talking to other people at a similar level. And then I would say also just sort of leaning into the people you do know and asking them if they have recommendations on other people to talk to and if they can introduce you to them as well.
I can jump in a little bit. You know, I think what Rosalie said about making connections with your peers is critically important. This was super important to me as a graduate student and as a postdoc, and continues to be very important to me. That's why I alluded to my monthly gatherings with my graduate school friends. So I recently was speaking with a mentee who's a graduate student. I think she's finishing up her dissertation. So she's not a first year like this question asker is, but she just casually mentioned this writing group she was in. She said, you know, they started it long before the pandemic, but it was a group of doctoral students getting together once a week, Wednesday evenings, a couple hours to be in the same space and write their dissertations at the same time, almost like a study group, I guess. And, you know, it was nice because they shared snacks, they had a little chit chat, and they just developed a peer network there. But she said that they had kind of put it on pause starting in March when quarantine hit and everything. And only recently somebody from their group reinitiated it. So they're actually doing it on Zoom, where they're just opening Zoom and sort of sitting together to write. And she was just kind of surprised, I think, about how effective that was. It's not as good as being in person, but you know, if you can find some classmates who are looking for connections just like you are, I bet if you're a first year graduate student, everybody else is in the same boat. So just opening up a study group that's just online, you know, just sit with your video screen open. It might be something easy to do. So that doesn't really get at like networking with more senior people, but that's one thing to start with. And I'll just add, you know, I now collaborate with some of my graduate school friends. So we're colleagues now too. So just establishing those relationships early is super relevant to your future research career as well. I just wrote a grant with one of my friends from graduate school. We're co-PIs on it. And so, you know, these relationships stand the test of time. So building them early is really critical. So that's one piece of advice.
I would just echo what Kim said, but I would just emphasize on in order to create a meaningful connection, it's really hard to do when you can't see each other's face. So I think, you know, Zoom or WebEx or any way that you can do this remotely. And like Rosalie said, if you can safely meet together outside somewhere, that's great. But I think more realistically right now, especially as the weather's getting colder, you need to be intentional about scheduling these meetings. You don't have to have a subject to talk about, just have a one-on-one and see each other's faces, and, you know, just seeing faces will help create that meaningful connection and spur that conversation that you need.
All right, I have another question that's not directed to a specific person, so whoever wants to chime in. What would your recommendations be to get papers written? I've been overwhelmed with meetings and housework, working so much more, but finding myself not being able to write.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think Rosalie or Julianne, I forget which one of you alluded to this, but one of the strategies that I've used since I attended a Write Your Dissertation workshop at SCR many, many, many years ago was breaking it down into very small chunks. So not just like, okay, let me write the methods section today. It's like, let me write the study population section of the methods section. And it can be very satisfying to check those very small tasks off your list. And also blocking out time on your calendar is like really critical. So I have done that in the past few weeks. I've blocked a full day to just focus. I can't really say much about the dishes other than to leave them, but that's not, you can't leave them forever. I think Lauren had some ideas.
So I'm one of those people that can't leave the dishes. Yeah, if my house isn't clean, it just doesn't work for me. So yeah, I definitely agree with Kim. I think calendar blocking is probably one of the best methods to get things done. I mean, we all live by calendars, right? If it says you have a meeting, you're going to go to a meeting. If it says writing, then that's protected time to write. You know, the other piece of it is, it's not just the writing, it's also the writing environment. I know for me, I've realized that I cannot write with any background noise. Like, even if a kid is snoring, like it's going to throw me off. And so I've had to figure out when is the optimal time for me to write and really try and block my calendar in alignment with that. And so that may also be important too, just figuring out like, when do I write my best, and telling everybody around you like, hey, this is the time that I'm going to be most productive. Can we facilitate ourselves so that I can write during this 2-hour block? And also realizing that like it's not all going to get done at once. I think writing days are great. It's a luxury for me as of late. And so what I do is, again, big writing goal, submitting a grant, 2 hours every day. And that seemed like it wasn't going to work very early on, but it actually did get me there. And there were days where I wrote a paragraph, and there were days where I wrote and erased 5 sentences, but I knew, okay, I have this time again tomorrow, and again the next day, and again the next day. And somehow, magically, I looked at it and I was like, I don't even remember writing half of this, but somehow it just gets done. And so I think consistency in this time is really, what you can buy yourself, and just doing a little bit every day would be my advice.
I would echo both those things, like blocking off time, breaking it down into small chunks, and then just having someone to be accountable to. Like sometimes that can just be a coworker or like another postdoc in my case who's also trying to write, and just send them a Slack message, hey, here's my goal for today, and then check in with them at the end of the day. Did I accomplish that?
I'm going to add again, sorry to jump in again, but I'm recently using this new strategy, which I never used before, but just getting something down on paper, a messy first draft, because I think I can really struggle with writing the perfect sentence or finding the perfect reference for something I have an idea about. But really just writing something very sloppy is better than writing nothing. And I remember even as a postdoc, I was very slow to get this one paper done. And my advisor finally said, like, I just kept saying the discussion's not done, the discussion's not done. And she just said, you know what, just bullet point the discussion and send it to me. It's okay to have a messy first draft. So don't try to be perfect when you sit down to write. That's too scary.
Yeah, that's great. I also do the ugly first draft, and I love that. I actually even title it Ugly First Draft. So we have a couple of final few questions here. This one is from someone who happened to notice that all the panelists are women. And so it's really nice to obviously hear from all of you and from your perspective as women, especially for other women. And so in thinking about how we can advocate for ourselves, do you have just a quick tip that you could share that would be helpful for other women out there about advocating for yourself?
I'll just jump in for a second. So many of you can see this question in the slide panel, and Manouk actually asked if she heard a report on the BBC that women working from home, or that working from home was leveling the playing field for men and women. And I've actually heard the opposite, that women are much worse off than men during this pandemic, because they're more likely to be taking on more household tasks and child rearing and all of the things. And so I don't know, what are the things specifically? I mean, you don't need to talk about your own personal relationship and how you balance things, but maybe how we can make others aware of the situations we're in and the challenges that we're facing, either as women or as parents or as whatever.
Well, I noticed when you first asked the question, Erica, none of us jumped in. And I think that does say something about how we feel about advocating for ourselves or for women in general. I did spend those few moments thinking about it. And I think I'm in a unique situation because most of my group is women. And so I feel like we're all sort of in it together, the people I work closest with. But that's not everybody. And I would say I find it a lot easier to advocate for my peers than I do for myself. And so that's one way to do it, is to advocate for each other. So I'll say, so-and-so would be great for this, did you consider asking so-and-so for this, on this analysis or something? So that's one small answer.
Well, I didn't jump in immediately because I was trying to temper my potential response. I'm an introvert by nature, but I think one of the things that I've had to do is sort of look at myself and sort of say, if not you, then who, right? Like, if you're not going to be your best advocate, who's going to do it for you? And, there are ways of getting sponsors and mentors and, advisors that are going to jump in, like my advisor did. But at the end of the day, like, it's my career on the line. It's my research. And that's one of the other things that I think drives me, because I feel so passionately about my research and about the women who research serves. I don't look at it as just I'm advocating for myself. I'm advocating for them. And so, you can do it in subtle ways, like put in a response at the bottom of your email, or you can do it in very overt ways by saying, why was I not included, as a part of this paper or a part of this team? And that the worst that can happen is, maybe some hurt feelings, but at the end of the day, they'll think twice before they don't include you the second time, right? Because they don't want to have to deal with the response. And so I just think it's really important to reframe your thinking. Like as women, I think we tend to think about others before ourselves. And I think you just have to have this like outer body experience and just say, if not me, then who's going to do it? And that's something I continue to tell myself. And eventually people will eventually treat you the way that you treat yourself, right? Like if you're advocating for yourself, they will eventually start stepping up and advocating for you. And so it's training yourself and training the people around you to give you the respect, the autonomy that you really do deserve.
When that question was asked and we were all sitting here in silence for different reasons, in my head I was screaming, speak up, but that is the thing that you need to do is you need to speak up. Don't let those conversations just occur in your head. If there's, something that you need to advocate for yourself, just say it. And like Lauren said, we're very bad a lot of times at doing that. And like Kim said, we're very good at advocating for other people. So agree, put ourselves first and speak up.
Yeah, that was really nice to hear. Make them think twice. I like that. We are running short on time, but I do want to share one quick comment that I have, that I think that this was actually just really nice to hear other scientists, especially that I think of as super productive, say, hey, this year is not as productive. It's a hard year. It's a weird year. And so I just wanted to thank the four of you for sharing your open and honest thoughts about all of this and give us some tips on how to move forward and stay productive. I think that's really helpful since we're all struggling a similar struggle. But I'd like to just end with one quick final question for everybody watching out there. The of course, is fairly new. And so one of our goals is to really understand how we can best help out all the other early career people out there. So our questions for you are, one, are there any ideas or future needs or other future AMC events or webinars that you would like to see? And then two, is there anything that you'd like for us to bring up at the annual meeting? And so if you have thoughts on either of these future events, annual meeting thoughts, please feel free to write them in the chat. And then I believe you'll also get a post-webinar survey. You can also write them there. We eventually see those responses. But I'd like to thank all of you for attending and supporting the Cohort Consortium AMC. We look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.